I found out my son has been secretly taking out loans in my name for 5 years. He thought I wouldn't find out. I stayed quiet for a week, then called him. Come over urgently. Alone. When he walked into the house, "Good day, dear listeners. It's Clara again. I'm glad you're here with me. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. I never thought I'd become one of those elderly women who couldn't trust her own son. For 68 years, I'd lived honestly, worked hard, and believed that family meant something sacred. My late husband Robert and I had built a comfortable life in our modest 2-story house in Portland, Oregon. After he passed 3 years ago, I thought my son David would be my anchor. How wrong I was. The first strange letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in March. I was having my usual breakfast, oatmeal with blueberries, black coffee, when the mail slot clinked. Among the utility bills and grocery store flyers, there was an envelope from First National Credit Union. I opened it casually, expecting perhaps some promotional offer. Final notice. Payment overdue, $847.23. My hands trembled. I'd never opened an account with First National. I called immediately, certain it was a mistake, some clerical error with a similar name. The customer service representative was polite, but firm. "Mrs. Peterson, this account was opened in your name 5 years ago. We have your signature, your social security number, your address. The initial loan was for $12,000. 5 years ago." My mind raced back. That was when David had his rough patch, when his small construction business nearly failed, when he'd come to me with tears in his eyes, asking to borrow $5,000. I'd given it to him, no questions asked. He'd promised to pay me back within 6 months. He never did. I hung up, my heart pounding against my ribs. Could this be connected? No, surely not. David wouldn't. He couldn't, but the seed of doubt, once planted, grows quickly in the darkness. Over the next week, I started checking my credit report, something I hadn't done in years. What I found made my blood run cold. 7 different loans. Credit cards from banks I'd never heard of. A car loan for a vehicle I didn't own. The total? Nearly $87,000. Every single one opened over the past 5 years. Every single one with my forged signature. I sat in Robert's old armchair, the one that still smelled faintly of his cologne, and let the truth wash over me. My son had been stealing from me for half a decade. While I'd welcomed him for Sunday dinners, while I'd babysat his children, while I'd listened to his complaints about money troubles, he'd been systematically destroying my financial life. The rage came first, hot and blinding. Then the shame. How could I have been so stupid, so blind? Finally, a cold, calculated calm settled over me. I wouldn't confront him immediately. I needed to think, to plan, to understand the full scope of his betrayal. For 1 week, I said nothing. I smiled at his text messages. I acted normal during our Wednesday phone call. When he asked if I could watch the kids on Friday, I agreed sweetly. But inside, I was gathering evidence. I photographed every document. I called every creditor. I created a spreadsheet that Robert would have been proud of. Dates, amounts, interest rates, late fees. The picture became clearer and clearer. David had used my identity as his personal ATM machine. On the 8th day, I picked up my phone with steady hands. "David, it's Mom. I need you to come over, tonight, and come alone. Don't bring Jessica or the kids. This is important." His voice was casual, unsuspecting. "Sure, Mom. Is everything okay? We need to talk. 6 o'clock. Don't be late." I hung up before he could ask more questions. I spent the afternoon preparing. I laid out every document on the dining room table in chronological order, like evidence at a crime scene. I made copies of everything. I even set up my old tape recorder. Robert had used it for business meetings, hidden behind the china cabinet. At 5:58 p.m., I heard his truck pull into the driveway. My heart was racing, but my hands were steady. I'd spent a week mourning the son I thought I had. Now it was time to confront the stranger who'd stolen his face. The doorbell rang. I walked to the door slowly, deliberately. Through the frosted glass, I could see his silhouette. Tall, confident, completely unaware that his world was about to collapse. I opened the door. David stood there with that familiar smile, the one that used to melt my heart. "Hi, Mom. What's this all about?" I stepped aside without a word, gesturing for him to enter. As he walked past me toward the living room, I wondered, did he really think I'd never find out? Or did he simply not care? David stopped dead when he saw the dining room table. I watched his face carefully. The moment recognition hit, his expression shifted from confusion to panic to forced calm, all in the space of 3 seconds. "Mom, what is all this?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I walked past him and sat down at the head of the table in Robert's old chair. I gestured to the seat opposite me. "Sit down, David." "Mom, sit down." Something in my voice made him obey. Good. He should be afraid. I picked up the first document, the original loan from First National, the one that started everything 5 years ago. March 15th, 2020, $12,000. My signature, except I never signed it. "Do you recognize this, David?" He opened his mouth, but I raised my hand. "Don't lie to me. Not now. I've spent the past week verifying every single one of these." I gestured to the papers spread before us. 7 loans, 4 credit cards, 1 car loan, $87,342. Plus interest and late fees, we're looking at over $115,000 of debt. In my name. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the kitchen clock ticking, the hum of the refrigerator, the sound of my own heartbeat. "How long did you think you could hide this?" My voice was quiet now, almost a whisper. "Did you think I'd die before anyone noticed? Did you plan to let your mother go to her grave drowning in debt she never created?" "Mom, please, let me explain." Explain? What could possibly explain this? I stood up, my hands flat on the table. "You came to me crying 5 years ago. You begged me for $5,000 to save your business. I gave it to you without hesitation because you're my son. And while I was being your mother, you were forging my signature and destroying my credit." David's face crumpled. Here come the tears, I thought bitterly. The same tears he'd used 5 years ago. "I was desperate," he said. "The business was failing. Jessica was pregnant with our 3rd child. We were going to lose the house. So you decided to destroy your mother's life instead?" "I was going to pay it back. I swear, Mom, I had a plan." A plan that involved taking out more loans every year? A plan that's left me with ruined credit and debt collectors calling daily? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Some plan, David." He reached across the table, trying to take my hand. I pulled away as if he'd burned me. "Don't touch me! Don't you dare!" The fear I'd been suppressing for the past week suddenly surged up. What if I couldn't fix this? What if my credit was permanently destroyed? What if I lost my house? The house Robert and I had paid off decades ago. The house that was supposed to be my security in old age. I was 68 years old. I lived on Social Security and Robert's pension. I'd been careful, frugal, responsible. And now, because of my own son, I might lose everything. But beneath the fear, something else was growing. Determination. I'd survived Robert's death. I'd survived cancer 10 years ago. I'd survived the Great Recession and the pandemic and every other challenge life had thrown at me. I would survive this too, and more than that, I would make this right. Get out, I said quietly. Mom, please, get out of my house. I need to think. We can fix this together. I'll get a second job. You've had 5 years to fix this. Get out, now. David stood, his face pale. Mom, I love you. I'm so sorry. I turned my back on him. I heard his footsteps, heard the front door open and close, heard his truck start and pull away. Only then did I allow myself to shake. I spent that night at the kitchen table with my laptop, learning everything I could about identity theft, fraud, credit repair, legal options. The internet had resources I'd never known existed. Forums full of people who'd been through similar situations, legal aid websites, step-by-step guides. By 3 a.m, I had the skeleton of a plan. First, I would file police reports, make this official. Second, I would contact every single creditor with fraud affidavits. Third, I would freeze my credit. Fourth, I would consult with a lawyer about my options. And fifth, this one made my heart ache, but I knew it was necessary. I would build a case that would force David to face real consequences. My son had made his choice. Now I would make mine. The Portland Police Department's fraud division occupied a dingy office in the basement of the precinct. Detective Sarah Chen was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that reminded me of myself at that age. Mrs. Peterson, I want to be honest with you, she said after I'd laid out everything. Family fraud cases are complicated. Even with clear evidence, prosecution is difficult when the victim is reluctant. I'm not reluctant. She looked at me carefully. This is your son. If we pursue this, he could face serious criminal charges. Felony identity theft. Fraud. We're talking potential prison time. He stole over $100,000 from me, Detective Chen. He's been doing it for 5 years. What would you do if it were your mother? Something shifted in her expression. I'd want justice. Okay, Mrs. Peterson, let's build this case properly. Over the next 3 hours, I gave my statement. I provided copies of every document. Detective Chen photographed everything, took notes, asked detailed questions. When we finished, she handed me a case number and several forms. File these fraud affidavits with each creditor. I'm also recommending you place a fraud alert and freeze your credit immediately. And Mrs. Peterson? Don't discuss this investigation with your son. If he contacts you, document everything, but don't tell him about the police report. He'll find out eventually. Yes, but by then we'll have everything we need. I left the precinct feeling lighter than I had in days. This was real now, official. There was no going back. That evening, my phone rang. Jessica, David's wife. Margaret, what the hell did you say to David? He came home devastated last night. He hasn't eaten. He's barely spoken to the kids. Did he tell you why? A pause. He said you found some old paperwork and got confused. He said you're accusing him of something he didn't do. Confused. Old paperwork. The audacity of his lies made my hands clench. Jessica, I'm not confused. I have 7 fraudulent loans in my name, totaling over $100,000. Every single one opened by David using my stolen identity. That's not confusion. That's a crime. Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice was cold. You're going to destroy this family over money? Over paperwork? David made some mistakes, yes, but he's your son, Margaret. Your only child. Is this really how you want to spend your final years? Bitter and alone? My final years? I laughed. Is that a threat, Jessica? Should I be worried about my health? That's not what I meant. I'm saying family forgives. Family doesn't go to war over money. Family doesn't commit fraud against each other either. But here we are. You're being selfish and cruel. Think about your grandchildren. Do you want them to grow up knowing their grandmother put their father in prison? I want them to grow up knowing that actions have consequences. That theft is wrong, even when it's family, especially when it's family. Jessica's voice rose. We'll fight this. We'll get lawyers. We'll prove you're incompetent, that you're senile, that you don't know what you're signing. Are you threatening me, Jessica? I'm telling you what will happen if you continue down this path. David has documentation. He'll say you gave him permission, that you're just confused now. Then he should have no problem explaining it to the police. Silence. The police? I filed a report this morning. Case number 2025-FR-4472. Feel free to share that with David. I heard Jessica's sharp intake of breath. You actually went to the police? Against your own son? Against a criminal who happens to be my son, yes. You'll regret this, Margaret. We have rights too. We have options. So do I, Jessica. So do I. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were trembling again, but not from fear this time. From rage, the entitlement, the manipulation, the audacity to threaten me in my own home, on my own phone. Who did they think they were dealing with? Some weak, confused old woman they could bully into silence? 20 minutes later, David called. I let it go to voicemail. Then he called again. And again. 7 times in 1 hour. The voicemail started apologetic, pleading. By the 7th message, his tone had changed completely. Mom, Jessica told me what you did. This is insane. You're going to destroy me over a misunderstanding? I'll lose my contractor's license. I could lose my kids. Is that what you want? Fine. You want to play hardball? We'll play hardball. Don't say I didn't warn you. I saved every message. This was my point of no return, I realized. The moment the gloves came off, when my son and his wife showed me exactly who they were. People who would threaten and manipulate rather than accept responsibility for their crimes. Good. Let them show their true faces. It would make what came next so much easier. The lawyer's office smelled of leather and old books. Martin Greenberg had been practicing elder law for 30 years, and his reputation was stellar. He listened to my story without interruption, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. Mrs. Peterson, you have an exceptionally strong case for both criminal prosecution and civil recovery. The documentation is thorough. However, I need to ask, are you prepared for how ugly this might get? They've already started threatening me. It will get worse before it gets better. Family fraud cases become extremely personal. Your son will likely claim you're incompetent, that you gave permission, that you're being manipulated by outsiders. He tapped his pen thoughtfully. We should move quickly to establish your competency beyond question. Over the next week, I followed Martin's instructions precisely. I underwent a cognitive evaluation with a neuropsychologist. Perfect scores. I compiled financial records showing decades of responsible money management. I gathered character references from my doctor, my neighbors, my book club. Every piece of evidence proved the same thing. I was sharp, competent, and absolutely certain about what had happened. Meanwhile, Detective Chen was building the criminal case. She'd obtained David's handwriting samples from his contractor's license application. A forensic document examiner confirmed what I already knew. The signatures on the loan applications were forgeries, and David's hand had written them. I was preparing dinner one evening when someone pounded on my front door. Not knocked, pounded. Through the peephole, I saw David and Jessica. David looked terrible, unshaven, wild-eyed. Jessica's face was twisted with fury. Mom, open this door. We need to talk. I didn't move. I know you're in there. Your car's in the driveway. Mom, please, we can fix this. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Margaret! That was Jessica now. You're destroying this family. Your grandchildren are asking why Grandma hates Daddy. Is this what you want? To traumatize children?" David's voice again, louder. "I'll pay it back. Every cent. Just drop the police report." "Mom, please, they're talking about pressing charges. I could go to prison. Your grandchildren could grow up without a father." "You should have thought of that before you committed fraud," I called through the door. "It wasn't fraud. You're confused. You gave me permission. You just don't remember. You're getting old, Mom. Your memory isn't what it was." "My memory is perfect, David. Perfect enough to remember that I never authorized a single one of those loans." Jessica started screaming. "You vindictive old bitch! You're doing this because you're alone and bitter. Because Dad died and you have no one, and you want to make everyone as miserable as you are." "I'm calling the police," I said calmly. "You have 30 seconds to leave my property, or I'm reporting this as harassment and trespassing." "This is your property?" David's laugh was harsh. "You mean the property I helped you maintain for years? The roof I fixed? The deck I built? I guess that doesn't count for anything." 20 seconds. "Fine," Jessica shrieked. "You want to be alone? You'll be alone. Don't expect to ever see your grandchildren again. Don't expect to be invited to birthdays or Christmas or anything. You're dead to this family." 10 seconds. I'm dialing now. I heard them storm off the porch, heard their car doors slam, heard them peel out of my driveway. I stood in the hallway for a long moment, my whole body shaking. Then I sent the recording to Detective Chen and Martin Greenberg. Martin called within 10 minutes. "Margaret, this is perfect. This is harassment, intimidation of a witness. This strengthens our case enormously. But I want you to get a restraining order. First thing tomorrow." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house made me jump. What if they came back? What if they broke in? I was a 68-year-old woman living alone. They were younger, stronger, desperate. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Robert's pillow still beside me, and felt more alone than I had since his funeral. The next morning, I filed for a temporary restraining order. The judge granted it immediately based on the recording and the ongoing fraud case. For the next 3 days, I barely left my house. My neighbor Susan noticed and brought over a casserole. "Margaret, you look exhausted. Is everything okay?" I almost lied, almost said everything was fine. But looking at Susan's kind face, I broke down and told her everything. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Your own son? Margaret, I'm so sorry." "I need a few days," I said quietly. "I just need to rest and think clearly. Take all the time you need, and if you need anything at all, I'm right next door." For the next 5 days, I rested. I read books. I took long baths. I let my mind and body recover from the adrenaline of confrontation. But I never stopped planning my next move. The letter arrived on a Saturday morning, delivered by regular mail. Expensive cream stationery, David's handwriting. "Dear Mom, I've spent the past 2 weeks in absolute agony, reflecting on my actions and the pain I've caused you. You're right. What I did was unforgivable. I violated your trust in the worst possible way. I'm writing to ask for one chance to make this right. Not to avoid consequences. I deserve whatever punishment comes. But to rebuild what I've broken. I'm prepared to sign over the deed to my house. I'm prepared to sell everything I own. Jessica and I have separated. She's moved in with her mother. I've told her that my priority is making amends to you. I'm not asking you to drop the police report. I'm asking for the opportunity to show you, through actions, not words, that I can become the son you deserved all along. Please, Mom, let me try. Your son..." "David, I read it twice." Then I called Martin Greenberg. "It's a manipulation tactic," he said immediately. Classic abuser behavior. They escalate. You stand firm, so they switch to extreme contrition. Don't respond. What if he's genuine? Margaret, genuine remorse doesn't include phrases like, I deserve whatever punishment comes, while simultaneously trying to avoid exactly that punishment. He's testing whether he can emotionally manipulate you. Don't give him the satisfaction of a response. I put the letter in my evidence folder and said nothing. 3 days later, flowers arrived. A massive arrangement of white roses, my favorites, the ones Robert used to bring me. The card read, Thinking of you every day. I love you, Mom. I gave them to Susan. Take these. I can't look at them. The next week, David's children's handwriting started appearing. Crayon-written notes from my grandchildren. Dear Grandma, we miss you. Why don't you visit anymore? Did we do something wrong? Love, Emma. That one nearly broke me. I had to sit down, my hands shaking with rage. Using the children. Actually using his own children to manipulate me. I called Martin again. This has to stop. The restraining order prohibits direct contact with you, not indirect contact through mail or gifts. But save everything. It shows a pattern of manipulation. Sunday morning, I went to church for the first time in months. I'd been avoiding it, ashamed of my family situation. But Susan convinced me. You need your community, Margaret. You need people who know you're not crazy. She was right. After the service, several women from my Bible study group surrounded me. Margaret, we heard you've been going through something difficult, Martha, the group leader, said gently. We want you to know we're here for you. I hadn't planned to tell them, but looking at their kind, concerned faces, the whole story spilled out. The silence that followed was heavy. Then Martha spoke. My sister went through something similar with her daughter, forged checks, stolen credit cards. It nearly destroyed her, but she stood firm, and eventually her daughter got the help she needed. You're not alone in this, Margaret. Another woman, Carol, added, My nephew stole from my mother, his own grandmother. She felt so guilty, like she'd failed as a parent. But the truth is, adult children make their own choices. You're not responsible for his crimes. Their support was a balm I hadn't known I needed. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like a terrible person for holding my son accountable. That afternoon, Susan invited me for tea. We sat in her sunny kitchen, and she showed me photos from her recent trip to her daughter in California. You know what strikes me about your situation? She said thoughtfully. You're being punished for doing the right thing. That's backwards. Sometimes I wonder if I should just forgive him and move on. Forgiveness doesn't mean no consequences, Margaret. You can forgive him and still protect yourself. You can love him and still hold him accountable. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. Her words settled something in my chest that had been twisted and painful. That week, I started attending a support group for elder fraud victims. Hearing other people's stories, some so much worse than mine, gave me perspective. A 90-year-old man whose daughter had stolen his entire life savings. A widow whose son had taken out a second mortgage on her home without her knowledge. How do you all cope? I asked during my first meeting. We remind ourselves, an elderly woman named Florence said, that being a victim of fraud doesn't make us foolish. It makes us human. Trust isn't stupidity, it's love. And the people who betrayed that trust are the ones who should be ashamed, not us. I went home that night, feeling stronger than I had in months. David and Jessica had gone quiet. No more letters, no more flowers, no more manipulative notes from the children. I knew they were watching, waiting, strategizing. Let them. I had something they didn't. A community of people who believed in me, supported me, and reminded me that I was doing the right thing. I was ready for whatever came next. The doorbell rang at 7 on a Thursday evening. I checked the security camera I'd installed the week before, a gift from Susan's son, a police officer who'd been horrified by my situation. David stood alone on my porch, holding a small package. He looked directly at the camera and held up his hands in a gesture of surrender. "Mom, please, 5 minutes. I'm not here to fight. I just want to talk, parent to parent. Please." Against my better judgment, or maybe because part of me still wanted to believe in my son, I opened the door. But I left the chain lock engaged. "You have 3 minutes. The restraining order was lifted yesterday. My lawyer filed a motion. Since I haven't contacted you directly and all communication has been peaceful, the judge granted it." He showed me a paper through the gap. "I'm legally allowed to be here, but I'll leave if you want. Please, Mom. Hear me out." I studied his face. He looked genuinely broken, thinner, older, exhausted. Was this real remorse or just a better performance? 3 minutes. Say what you came to say. "Can I come in?" Standing on the porch like this, the neighbors, 2 minutes and 45 seconds. He sighed. "Okay. Mom, I've been doing a lot of therapy. Real therapy, twice a week. And I've realized that I've been a terrible son. Not just with the loans, with everything. I took you for granted. I used you. I justified it by telling myself I'd pay you back someday. But that was just another lie I told myself." He paused, seeming to gather courage. "Jessica and I are divorcing. She can't forgive what I did, and honestly, I don't blame her. I've moved into a studio apartment. I've sold my truck. I'm working 2 jobs now, construction during the day, stocking shelves at night. Every extra penny goes into an account I've set up to pay you back." He handed the small package through the gap. "This is the first payment. It's only $2,300, but it's a start. I know it's nothing compared to what I owe, but I wanted you to know I'm serious." I took the package, but didn't open it. "Why now, David? Why this sudden change of heart?" "Because I almost lost everything. My kids barely speak to me. My wife is gone. My mother—" His voice broke. "My mother looks at me like I'm a stranger. And I deserve all of it. But I can't live with myself if I don't at least try to make it right." Something in his voice sounded genuine. Despite everything, despite my caution, I felt my resolve wavering. "The police investigation, I'm not asking you to drop it. I'll plead guilty. I'll take responsibility. I needed you to know that I'm changing, that I'm trying." I almost believed him. Almost. Then I saw it. Just a flicker. So quick I might have missed it if I hadn't been watching carefully. His eyes darted to the side, and I realized someone else was there, just out of camera view. "Who's with you?" "No one. I came—" "Don't lie to me. I saw you look. Who is it?" A pause. Then Jessica stepped into view, her face cold and hard. "Oh, for God's sake, David, this isn't working. She's not buying it." My blood turned to ice. It had all been an act. The remorse, the therapy, the payment, all of it staged. David's face changed in an instant, the mask of contrition sliding away to reveal frustration and anger beneath. "Mom, just take the money and drop the police report. That's all we're asking. Take this payment, we'll set up a plan, and we all move on with our lives." "You mean I drop the criminal charges and pretend this never happened?" "It doesn't have to be like this." Jessica pushed forward. "You're going to send the father of your grandchildren to prison? Destroy his entire future over money? Over fraud, over crime, over betrayal." David's voice hardened. "We're trying to compromise here. We're offering you a solution. Why can't you just—" "Because what you did was illegal, David. Criminal. This isn't a family disagreement we can smooth over at Thanksgiving dinner. You forged my signature. You stole my identity. You ruined my credit. These are crimes with victims, and I'm that victim. Jessica's expression turned venomous. You know what I think? I think you're enjoying this. Playing the martyr, getting sympathy from your church friends, being the center of attention for once in your pathetic, lonely life. That's enough. My voice was ice. Get off my property. Both of you. Mom, please. I said get off my property. This conversation is over. David's face twisted with rage. Fine. You want to play hardball? We'll see how you feel when the prosecutor tells you there's not enough evidence. When my lawyer tears apart your case. When your perfect documentation turns out to be nothing but a confused old woman's misunderstanding. Leave. Now, or I call the police. They left, but not before Jessica turned and spat. You'll die alone, Margaret. Bitter, angry, and alone. Is that really how you want your story to end? I closed the door, locked it, and leaned against it, my heart pounding. My hands were shaking. My legs felt weak. For a moment, fear washed over me. What if they were right? What if I was making a terrible mistake? But then I looked at the package David had given me. I opened it. Inside was a cashier's check for $2,300 and a document. A settlement agreement stating that accepting this payment constituted acknowledgement of a family loan arrangement and waived all claims of fraud. They'd tried to trick me into signing away my legal rights. My fear crystallized into something harder, colder, determination, resolve. Let them threaten. Let them manipulate. Let them try every tactic in their arsenal. I would not break. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday in early November. Detective Chen had warned me it would be intense, that David's lawyer would try to discredit me, that I needed to stay calm no matter what they said. I wore my best Navy suit, the one I'd worn to Robert's funeral. Armor for battle. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. David sat at the defense table with his attorney, a slick-looking man named Richard Paxton, who'd made his reputation defending white-collar criminals. Jessica sat in the gallery behind them, flanked by David's business partner and his Aunt Linda, my former sister-in-law. They'd brought an audience, a show of family support to paint me as the villain. I sat with Martin Greenberg and Detective Chen. Susan had come too, sitting directly behind me, a quiet pillar of support. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Walsh, was a sharp woman in her 50s who'd reviewed every document in my case. This is one of the clearest family fraud cases I've seen, she'd told me during preparation. The evidence is overwhelming, but they're going to attack your credibility, your memory, your motives. Be prepared. Judge Morrison called the hearing to order. He was an older man with iron gray hair and a reputation for no-nonsense jurisprudence. A DA Walsh presented the evidence methodically. The forged loan applications, the handwriting analysis, the timeline, the total amount of fraud, each document projected on a screen for everyone to see. David's face grew paler with each exhibit. Then it was Paxton's turn. Your Honor, the defense doesn't dispute that loans were taken out in Mrs. Peterson's name. What we dispute is the characterization of these loans as fraudulent. Mrs. Peterson gave her son verbal permission to use her identity for financial purposes during a period when she was experiencing significant cognitive decline. Objection. Ada Walsh was on her feet. There's no evidence of cognitive decline. We have testimony prepared that will demonstrate. Judge Morrison held up his hand. I've reviewed the neuropsychological evaluation submitted by the defense. Mrs. Peterson scored in the 98th percentile for her age group. Unless you have evidence of a dramatic decline since that evaluation 3 weeks ago, Mr. Paxton, I suggest you move on. Paxton's jaw tightened. Your Honor, we also have evidence that Mrs. Peterson and her son had an agreement. A verbal agreement that conveniently leaves no documentation? That Mrs. Peterson vehemently denies? That would authorize her son to forge her signature on multiple legal documents. The judge's skepticism was evident. I watched David shift uncomfortably in his seat. Paxton changed tactics. "Your Honor, we'd like to call David Peterson to testify." David took the stand. He looked at me once, a pleading look that might have worked on me months ago. Now I met his gaze with cold calm. Under Paxton's questioning, David told his story. I'd been having memory problems. I'd verbally agreed to let him handle my finances. I'd forgotten about the loans due to age-related confusion. He'd been trying to protect me from stress. It was smooth, practiced, almost believable. Then ADA Walsh stood for cross-examination. "Mr. Peterson, you claim your mother gave you permission to take out loans in her name?" "Yes." "Yet you never once mentioned this arrangement to any of the banks?" They didn't ask." "You never mentioned it to your mother's doctor?" "It wasn't relevant." "You never mentioned it to your wife, who testified in deposition that she was shocked to learn about these loans?" David hesitated. "Jessica? She didn't understand the full situation." "What situation is that, Mr. Peterson? The situation where you systematically stole over $100,000 from your mother?" "Objection. Sustained. Rephrase, counsel." Ada Walsh nodded. "Mr. Peterson, let's talk about the timing. The first loan was taken out exactly 1 week after you asked your mother for $5,000, and she gave it to you freely, correct?" Yes. "So you had just received $5,000 in legitimate help from your mother. Yet 1 week later, you needed to fraudulently take out $12,000 more?" "My mother had already helped me once. I didn't want to ask again." "So instead of asking for help from a mother who'd already demonstrated willingness to help you, you chose to commit fraud?" David's composure cracked. "I was desperate. My business was failing. My family was struggling. So desperate that over 5 years you returned to defraud her 7 more times? I was planning to pay it back." "With what money, Mr. Peterson? According to your financial records, you've never once made a payment toward any of these loans." "I couldn't afford the payments and my business. But you could afford a new truck, a vacation to Mexico, an above-ground pool for your backyard." David's face flushed red. That was different." "Different how? You had money for luxuries, but not to repay the woman you claimed to have an agreement with?" "Objection. Badgering the witness." Judge Morrison leaned back. "Overruled. The witness may answer." David looked trapped. He glanced at Jessica, at his lawyer, then at me. I kept my expression neutral, unreadable. I made mistakes, okay? I made terrible mistakes. But my mother knew about at least some of the loans. She had to have known. Had to have known? Is that your testimony? That you're certain she knew, or that she must have known because you need her to have known to avoid a felony conviction? Silence. ADA Walsh let it hang there for a long moment. No further questions. David practically stumbled off the stand. As he passed the prosecution table, he looked at me again. This time, his expression wasn't pleading. It was afraid. Good. Judge Morrison called a brief recess. In the hallway, Jessica approached me with venom in her eyes. "Are you happy now? Watching him crumble up there? I'm watching him face the consequences of his choices." "You're destroying him. Don't you care that—" Susan stepped between us. "That's enough. Mrs. Peterson doesn't have to speak to you." Martin appeared at my other side. "I'd advise you to step back, Mrs. Peterson. Any further harassment could result in additional charges." Jessica's face contorted with rage, but she backed away. When we returned to the courtroom, Judge Morrison didn't waste time. "I've reviewed all the evidence and heard the testimony. I find probable cause to bind this case over for trial. The defendant is ordered to appear for arraignment in 2 weeks. Bail is set at $50,000. David's face went white. I walked out of that courtroom with my head high, Martin and Susan flanking me. I'd won the first battle. The war was almost over. The trial lasted 3 days. 3 days of evidence, testimony, expert witnesses, and David's increasingly desperate attempts to justify the unjustifiable. His defense crumbled piece by piece. The handwriting expert testified that the signatures were definitively forgeries executed by David Peterson. No room for doubt, no ambiguity. The neuropsychologist testified that I was cognitively intact, with memory and executive function well above average for her age group. Detective Chen testified about the evidence trail, the documentation, the systematic nature of the fraud. Several bank representatives testified that they'd never spoken with me, never verified my identity, never received any communication from me regarding these loans. David's own financial records showed that he'd spent the loan money on personal expenses, not business emergencies, not medical bills, but trucks and pools and vacations. The prosecution built an insurmountable case. David's attorney tried to paint him as a desperate father, a struggling businessman, a son who made mistakes under pressure. But every argument fell flat against the weight of evidence. On the third day, after just 90 minutes of deliberation, the jury returned. On the count of identity theft in the first degree, how do you find? Guilty. On the count of fraud in the first degree, how do you find? Guilty. 7 counts, 7 guilty verdicts. I watched David's face as each verdict was read. He aged 10 years in those few minutes. Beside him, his lawyer slumped in defeat. Behind him, Jessica wept, though whether from genuine sorrow or self-pity, I couldn't tell. The judge set sentencing for 3 weeks later. In those 3 weeks, David's lawyer approached Martin with a plea deal. David would pay full restitution in exchange for a reduced sentence. "What do you think?" Martin asked me. I thought about it for exactly 30 seconds. No, he pays full restitution regardless. That's civil court, separate from criminal charges. The criminal sentence should reflect the severity of what he did. 7 felonies over 5 years, that's not a mistake. That's a pattern of deliberate, calculated crime. Martin smiled. I'll inform the prosecutor of your position. At the sentencing hearing, the judge allowed me to make a victim impact statement. I stood at the podium looking directly at my son. David, when you were born, your father and I promised to raise you to be honest, hardworking, and responsible. We taught you that actions have consequences, that integrity matters more than money, that family means supporting each other, not exploiting each other. Somewhere along the way, you forgot those lessons, or maybe you never truly learned them. I don't know anymore. What I do know is this. You didn't just steal money from me. You stole my sense of security. You stole my trust in my own judgment. You stole 5 years of what should have been a peaceful retirement and turned them into stress, fear, and betrayal. You tried to manipulate me even after you were caught. You used your own children as weapons. You threatened me, harassed me, and attempted to gaslight me into believing I was confused or senile. I want the court to understand that this wasn't a one-time mistake made in desperation. This was calculated, repeated, and completely without remorse until you were caught. I loved my son. I mourned the man I thought he was. But the man sitting before this court today deserves every consequence he receives. I sat down. David was crying, but I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no regret. Just a cold, final closure. Judge Morrison sentenced him to 6 years in federal prison and ordered full restitution of $147,832, the principal plus interest and fees. David would serve at least 4 years before being eligible for parole. His contractor's license was permanently revoked. His professional reputation was destroyed. Jessica filed for divorce the next day. In her filing, she claimed she'd been unaware of David's crimes and portrayed herself as another victim. The court wasn't sympathetic. As his spouse, she'd benefited from the stolen money. She lost the house in the divorce settlement, and it was sold to help pay my restitution. David's business partner bought out his share of the company for pennies on the dollar. Within 2 months of the sentencing, David had lost everything: his freedom, his family, his career, his home, his reputation. As for the money, the court ordered wage garnishment for after his release, and the house sale covered about 40% of what he owed. I'd likely never see full repayment, but that wasn't the point anymore. The point was justice. The point was that he'd faced real consequences for real crimes. The point was that I'd stood up for myself against my own son and won. Martin called me with the final update on a cold December morning. "It's over, Margaret. The last of the court filings are complete. The criminal case is closed. The civil judgment is entered. You did it." I sat in Robert's old chair, looking at the Christmas tree Susan had helped me decorate, and let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for months. It was over. I'd won. 6 months after David's sentencing, I sold the house. It wasn't an easy decision. Robert and I had built our life there, raised David in those rooms, celebrated every holiday and milestone within those walls. But the house held too many ghosts now. Too many memories tainted by betrayal. I found a charming 2-bedroom condo in a senior community across town. It had a balcony overlooking a garden, a community center with activities, and neighbors who became friends within weeks. The money from the house sale, after settling the remaining debts David had created, gave me financial security again. Not wealth, but comfort. Peace of mind. The ability to sleep at night without worrying about debt collectors. I started volunteering at the local legal aid clinic, helping other elderly people navigate fraud cases. My experience made me uniquely qualified to guide them through the emotional and practical challenges. Every person I helped felt like a small redemption. Susan introduced me to her book club, and I rediscovered my love of reading. We met every Thursday afternoon, discussing everything from mysteries to memoirs over coffee and pastries. I took up watercolor painting, something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for. My paintings weren't masterpieces, but they brought me joy. That was enough. My church community embraced me. I joined the Women's Bible Study leadership team, and we started a support group for people dealing with family estrangement. I wasn't alone in my experience, I discovered. So many others had children or siblings who'd betrayed their trust. One sunny afternoon in May, I got an unexpected visitor. Emma, my oldest granddaughter, now 16. She stood nervously on my doorstep, clutching her car keys. "Grandma, can we talk?" My heart clenched. I hadn't seen her since before the trial. "Of course, sweetheart. Come in." We sat in my sunny living room and Emma looked around. "Your new place is nice." "Thank you. How did you find me?" Grandpa Robert's friend from the church told me. She twisted her hands in her lap. "Grandma, I wanted to say I'm sorry. For the letter they made me write. For not reaching out sooner. I was confused, and Mom and Dad told me you'd gone crazy. That you were trying to hurt Dad for no reason. And now? Now I'm old enough to understand what actually happened. Dad stole from you. For years. And when you caught him, he tried to make you seem like the bad guy." Her eyes filled with tears. I'm so ashamed that I believed them. I moved to sit beside her, taking her hand. "Emma, you were a child. You're not responsible for their lies. I should have known. I should have questioned it. And now you're here, which shows tremendous courage and character." We talked for 3 hours. I told her my side of the story, showed her the evidence, explained the legal process. She listened, asked questions, and cried. "Is it okay if I visit you sometimes?" she asked as she prepared to leave. "I know it might be weird with Dad and everything, but I miss you." "I would love that more than you know." Emma started visiting every other Sunday. We'd have lunch, talk about her college plans, share stories about Robert. She became a bright spot in my new life. Meanwhile, David's situation deteriorated further. In prison, he'd been assigned to a work detail in the laundry facility. No more construction, no more being his own boss. Just monotonous manual labor and the constant reminder of what he'd lost. Jessica had moved back in with her mother in a small apartment. She'd been forced to take a job as a receptionist, a significant step down from the comfortable life she'd enjoyed while David was spending stolen money. Her social media, which Emma occasionally showed me, was full of bitter posts about toxic family members and ungrateful people. David's business partner had turned the company into a success without him, reportedly saying in a local business interview that removing toxic influences had been the best decision he'd made. Linda, David's aunt who'd supported him during the trial, reached out to apologize. "I was wrong, Margaret. I thought family loyalty meant supporting David no matter what. But you taught me that real loyalty means holding people accountable. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I heard through mutual acquaintances that David's younger brother, who'd stayed neutral during the trial, had completely cut off contact with him, saying he was ashamed to share a name with someone who'd defrauded their own mother. Every piece of news about their downfall should have brought me satisfaction. Instead, I felt something gentler: validation. Confirmation that justice wasn't just a legal concept, but a real force in the world. My life blossomed in ways I'd never expected. I traveled to Seattle to visit an old college friend. I started dating a kind widower I met at church. Nothing serious, just companionship and shared meals. I'd spent so many years defining myself as a mother, as David's mother specifically. Now I was simply Margaret, artist, volunteer, friend, community member. And it turned out Margaret was someone I quite liked being. They say blood is thicker than water, but I learned that truth is thicker than blood. Standing up to my son was the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than burying my husband, harder than fighting cancer. Because it meant accepting that the person I'd raised, the child I'd loved unconditionally, had become someone capable of deliberate, sustained cruelty. But here's what I want you to understand. Protecting yourself isn't betrayal. Setting boundaries isn't cruelty. Demanding accountability isn't hate. Love without boundaries becomes enabling. Forgiveness without consequences becomes permission. Family loyalty shouldn't require sacrificing your dignity, your security, or your truth. If you're facing something similar, whether it's fraud, abuse, manipulation, or any other betrayal from someone you love, please hear this. You deserve protection. You deserve justice. You deserve peace. Your story matters. Your pain is valid. Your decision to stand up for yourself is brave. What would you do in my situation? Would you have pressed charges or tried to handle it privately? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please share it. Someone you know might be facing a similar situation and needs to hear that they're not alone. Thank you for listening to my story. May you never need to use the lessons I learned, but may you have the strength to do so if you must.